Pack your bags, Raph.
Where are we going?
We're going to Arkansas,
Arkansas.
in the United States of America,
What a fun place.
to see a movie called Minari.
What's Minari?
Minari is a plant.
Go on.
That's it.
Is this a movie about gardening?
Yes. No. Man, my wife would listen to it if it was about gardening.
Yes.
If our podcast was about gardening.
We know we would have one. She wouldn't be a listener. She would be on the podcast.
Yeah, let's
be honest here. She would lead the podcast and we would just be here.
Or she would criticize all the things we say wrong.
Yeah. Let's start a gardening podcast.
Yeah.
Garden theater.
But no, gardening is a topic, I suppose, farming in particular, because we're going to talk about the movie Minari. It's about a story about an immigrant South Korean family who's in America, and they go to Arkansas, they buy a plot of land, and the dad starts a farm, or tries to start a farm.
Yeah, and this is back in the Reagan era. I don't know what year that is, but they did mention Reagan was president, I think.
Oh, this is probably 70s or 80s then.
Yeah, I know very little about American history, so
yeah.
Reagan was a president that I am aware of.
So, yeah, today's review is going to be a little bit different from our previous ones. We're not going to talk about so much about as a review standpoint. We're going to try to focus in on the themes, the problems. What is the movie trying to tell us? And through some discussion, we'll arrive at an answer.
Maybe.
The best movies don't have an answer.
We will have a discussion, that much I can guarantee.
Wow. Really hyping it up. Yeah, I mean, like, the movie at more of a shallow point looks like it's a movie about, immigration, about moving and uprooting and trying to find a home.
Yeah.
And maybe even culturally, and it might be about the American dream.
I think it's very much about the American dream.
Okay. Yeah, I think so too. But I think it's going to use the American dream in a way that it speaks about something global, I guess, or a universal law, I think.
Universal
law.
Law.
Yeah.
What's the law?
I don't want to start off with the answer.
We're teasing them. Okay. Stay tuned to find out what the universal law is.
So I'm going to bring up what I found were like general problems that the movie introduced.
Okay.
You let me know if you kind of agree with them. So one problem obviously is farming.
Yes. Farming is hard.
The father buys a plot of land and it is hard work. In particular, they highlight, always having a source of water so that the vegetation is fruitful, right? And finding somebody to actually buy this produce.
Yep.
All this work is for nothing if you don't find someone.
Farming is hard. Businesses are hard.
Yeah. You haven't been on a farm, have you?
I have.
You have?
Yes. Why does this surprise you?
Which farm?
I couldn't tell you. Well, I mean, I've been on farm for the Ottawa Food Bank, where we plant. So I have literally farmed in the last year.
Oh yeah, we were out on the sun, right? And we were planting
you there
onions.
The first time?
Yeah.
Yeah, we planted onions. The last time I went, we actually picked some onions and picked a bunch of other stuff. It was a lot of harvesting. So there's that. I've also been on farms in Nigeria where I think it was a corn farm or something like that. I don't remember. There was tall stuff, but I was short then, so who knows what it was.
Okay. We both come into this with some personal experience, though, understanding that
I would say that
amazing.
I'm an expert farmer. Yeah, for sure.
But anyhow, that is one problem that it introduces, right? He's taking on this task of farming, and there's a lot of obstacles in his way for that. Another problem that's brought up is the son's heart disease.
Yeah.
Right?
Did they ever give that a name?
No.
Just a hole in his heart, right? Or something like that?
Yeah. So the son's name is David. I don't think his disease is given a name, but we understand that they don't completely understand what's going on, and that's why they're a little bit controlling about him. He's not allowed to run and stuff like that. And the conflict or the problem is that, he's a kid. He does want to experience life. He does want to run sometimes, and he feels like he's experiencing less life because of this heart disease, and they're trying to help him stay alive, right?
Yeah. The parents unsurprisingly, have a vested interest in keeping him alive.
Yes. Another problem is their marriage.
Okay.
Definitely, they have opposing viewpoints about how to handle what is best for the children, where they want to live, what's the best way to earn the money, all these things. We clearly see there's a toll between them, right?
Yeah.
And even in the first shot, we, like when they're in the car, like they both have slightly different expressions, even though nothing's said. Like you get a feeling like the woman is...
But she definitely doesn't want to be here.
Yeah,
you get that
less
vibe
eager.
straight up.
Yeah.
She does not want to be here, and for him, this is what he wants. This is his dream.
Yeah.
You almost get the feeling that he did not properly communicate to her what it was they purchased and were moving to. You almost get that feeling.
And something interesting about this problem is, it tickles down to these other problems, right? Trickles. Tickles.
Because they can tickle down too.
It trickles down to these other problems. It trickles down to the son's heart disease, right? What's the best way to raise this kid and what environment to raise him in? Should he be in California or should he be in Arkansas where it's hot, right? It trickles down into their problem. The fourth problem that I'm about to mention is money, right? What's the best way to earn money? Should they, scrap farming altogether? They're having all these arguments about these things. So clearly it feeds into all these other problems. I would say these were the 4 problems I kind of highlighted. Mm-hmm. Was there any problem that you specifically noticed? Because I don't think this is a full list.
I guess I didn't necessarily think of it in terms of problems. I mean, there's definitely also a little bit of a culture clash when the grandmother comes along, because she's a very different person. I mean, she's not American, she's Korean. Mm-hmm. And more so than even the parents, she has spent even more so of her life in South Korea, so she's very different. And you can definitely see the friction with her and the kids.
True.
Well, actually, the daughter doesn't get to do much, so I can just ignore her. But David definitely, he has these thoughts of, why is she here? Or I don't want her here. She's mean or whatever. And I can definitely fully sympathize with that viewpoint as a child.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a little bit of that. I guess I didn't think of it in terms of problems, because that just sounds, a lot of that is just domestic life, right? You live with a person, you have a family, there will be things that arise.
Yeah.
Yes, they are problems, but I don't know if they're worth being categorized as problems. I'm sweeping my arms around, yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, so the reason why I just categorize them as problems is because I think the weird thing is some of these don't look necessarily related, right? Farming and the heart disease don't necessarily look related right now. But I think the movie has a single answer for all of these things, sort of.
Are we still teasing what the universal lies?
Yes.
Okay.
Man, I'm so bad at this. Anyhow, so I also wanted to talk a little bit about certain themes, without necessarily the resolutions, but certain themes that are brought up. So I think the huge theme is control versus faith. I don't think that's the most accurate way to say it, but control versus faith.
Well, because they're religious, their faith is a good way of thinking about it. Yeah. Control and faith. Yeah. I mean, he definitely wants to be in control.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a fair way of phrasing that.
Yeah. So what I have to say about that then is that so Jacob, the husband, right, clearly is, and when I say faith, I don't necessarily even mean religious. I also mean just superstitious in the general sense.
Yeah.
And because the first example I'm about to give is when Jacob is trying to figure out where to dig a well, right? There's this little superstitious activity that involves a pronged...
The dowsing rod.
A what?
A dowsing rod.
Yeah, well, I've never seen that before in my life.
It is a thing. It's complete nonsense.
Okay. Anyhow, that's a superstitious thing, and not to say that that's equated with religion, but for the sake of, I think, what the screenwriter or the storyteller is doing here is that he's saying there's this aspect of, you have this character, Jacob, who tries to take control of his life. He does not accept these superstitions, really. And he's always a very practical man who figures things out himself. He's using science. He's using common sense to figure out where to dig the well and stuff. He does not participate in the religious activity in so much as it's just a cultural thing, right? So you on one side you have him who's like that, and on the other side you kind of have Monica, the wife, who is a little bit more displays more affinity towards superstition, right? She's more open to Christianity. She has a man brought in to anoint the house and stuff to keep the demons away, right? And whether you think she completely buys it or not, at the very least, she does show that she has some of these beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Let's move on to another theme of family.
Is that a theme? Yeah, I guess it's a theme.
It is. I think Jacob, it's most in Jacob, I think, because Jacob questions, I don't know, throughout the movie, I was a little skeptical about his true intentions for the farm. The intention being rather, is it for family or is it for his own dream, because this is actually just something he wants to do. The reason why I had gripe with that is because he claims that it's for family, and I clearly do know that he cares about the family and wants to provide for the family, but he also seems to want this more than he wants family.
Does he?
Yes. So when they're waiting in the hospital room,
mm-hmm.
he says, I'm going to see this through to the end, even if it doesn't work out.
Yes.
Right. And that's him choosing to stick with farming over his family. And that's why she had such gripe with it. That's why she was so
I don't know if that's fair, because she presents the ultimatum, basically.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one who makes this about family versus farming.
Yeah.
Because she's saying, I'm going to leave, and I don't want to do this, but he wants to do this. So yes, technically he is saying, I want to keep farming, and you can leave. I would think of it as him choosing farming over family if, he just went out on his own and started doing it. He didn't literally bring his entire family here to do this with him, and then the wife is choosing to leave. I don't know. I guess I do not blame him for saying, I want to see this through the end.
The reason why I think he is because she does bring the ultimatum, like you said, right? But she also truly believes that this farm isn't good for the family, right? She believes that the water or something isn't actually good for their kids. She also has some personal things going on, she's not necessarily fitting in with Arkansas that well, right?
Yeah.
But I think given that ultimatum, even though it might even be a little bit of an unfair ultimatum, he still chooses the dream over the family, right?
Yeah.
And another thing to back this up with is so when the movie initially starts, you see him a lot with his kid, David, right?
Yes.
During the middle of the movie, the second arc, which is probably an hour or so, you don't actually get any scenes with him with David unless if it's for disciplinary reasons. Yeah.
He's definitely very focused on the farm.
And I think it's intentional to show that he's pulled away from the family for the farm in this specific case.
Yes. So, okay, the reason why I don't necessarily like that is the same reason I don't necessarily like a lot of the way sometimes in movies we portray these kinds of choices, especially in your Hallmark Christmas movies, where it's dad's always going off to work. He doesn't really love the family. And in the end, it's dad's going to stop going to work now, and he's going to hang out with the family. And that makes no sense whatsoever, because that's not how anything works.
No.
So they've moved here, and you can argue or debate whether or not this was a good choice. But from my understanding, unless I missed something, however unclear he was in fully communicating with her, she did know they had bought land to farm, and they were moving to Arkansas to live. She was aware of these facts.
It's a little bit weird because I think initially she thought it was supposed to be a garden, and then she's like, "This is not a garden. This is farming."
Yes. So she wasn't fully aware of all that, which is, that's on him, right? He should definitely communicate. But then they get there, and the man wants to farm, and he's going to farm. He's farming, and basically all this sort of, I think of them as false dilemmas that come up are kind of irrelevant. Yes, he brings the produce into the hospital so he can sell it to the guy, and that's bad because his son is sick or his son is getting a checkup. But I'm also but is it bad?
Yeah. So I would agree with you. Him bringing the produce in wasn't bad, and I don't think the movie's necessarily saying farming is bad or
No, the movie is
dreams.
not saying that
Yeah.
because this is her point of view, right? She
Yeah.
is upset with him because of this, and this is how she sees that he is constantly choosing the farming and this over the family. But the way I'm sort of looking at it is like he's not necessarily doing that. You're the one creating this barrier. You're the one making this one or the other, as opposed to just both.
Okay. I'll take this on a different turn with the family theme.
Yeah.
I still have another thing to say. I think the grandma has a huge role in the theme of family because David initially doesn't like her, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, by the end of the movie, I'm just going to say the most valuable family member to me for his upbringing was his grandmother and within the time frame of that movie.
Sure, yeah.
Because she was the one who helped him with his problems. She was there to take care of him. And I think the movie challenges a little bit the idea of family and value of what you bring to the table. So what I mean by that, it sounds confusing, yeah. What I mean by that is so the husband is trying to provide for the family by bringing food to the table, right? And that you can't, if you don't have that, then your family's going to starve and die, right?
Yes.
But just because the grandma can't work, just because the grandma can't, do the typical grandma things like bake cookies or whatever that David kind of expected of her.
Yeah.
Even though she didn't bring any actual value to the family, she brought humongous value to David by simply loving him.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll leave it on there for family then.
I mean, yes, but I don't know if that's necessarily like a controversial thing or a new thing, right?
No, that's not a new thing.
Yeah. Having loving family is valuable in and of itself.
Yes, but it is slightly put in contrast with other parenting.
Within the movie?
Yeah.
Who's parenting?
Particularly the husband.
But he's there though. So I recognize that he's not there for most of the middle, but when we show up in Arkansas, he is, bringing David out to the farm with him. He's engaging with his children. And one of the reasons they bring the mother over is because he wants to focus on farming.
Yeah.
And the wife also wants to focus more on, getting her chicken sorting really up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why there's other reasons too, but that's majorly why they bring the mother over, to specifically fill this hole that they know they're about to leave based on what they're doing. So I don't think that's bad parenting or a lack of love. I think that's just how life works sometimes. Right?
I think it is. I think the main character. Well, I'm going from David's perspective here. Jacob. Jacob is the dad. Like he has a flaw, right? Because he is the character who's kind of focused on. He definitely has a flaw,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that flaw is made perhaps the same flaw that you find in Hallmark movies: a father who's gone into work too much.
Yeah.
But it's a more realistic, I guess, playing out of the flaw.
Yeah.
And it's more nuanced. I don't think the movie's flat out saying that everything he's doing is wrong, because obviously you can't just quit your job and say, I'm just going to love you, and that will be all you ever need.
Yeah.
Right? But in terms of, I think what the movie is saying with the family is that, like, let's move on. I'll move on.
All the juicy conversations been saved for the end.
Yeah. You mentioned culture, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know if you caught this with the Jacob and the Christian guy that he hired, the really zealous dude.
Yes.
Kind of
Paul.
crazy dude. Yeah, Paul. So they were talking about how far to plant these plants or these vegetables, right? And what was it? Paul said they need to be further apart so they have the required space to adequately grow and produce vegetables. And Jacob says they need to be closer, right? This is a very good reflection of their two different cultures,
Yeah.
right? Where American society kind of has an emphasis on individualism, and to their point, there's a thing where if you do grow too close to somebody, if you're too close to somebody, perhaps you won't be able to grow, right? You're stifled by maybe other things. I don't know. In my personal life, I know if I get too close to somebody, there's always going to be a point in time where you start arguing and stuff, and that's where your friendship is actually challenged, or your relationship and stuff. And then to the other side, you have the Korean culture, which says, actually they should be closer because, that's what family is. And so his point of view is that these vegetables should grow closer.
Also, when they're far apart, you get bigger vegetables and everything's bigger in Texas.
Which state has all the corn? Missouri?
I don't know anything about America, man.
Kansas? I don't know. Anyhow, so this is the first part, though, we get an idea that the vegetables that are being grown represent humans, right?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Wow, what a big surprise. Anyhow, so that's going to suggest that the Minari also represents people, and that there's two types of parenting styles, right? There's the parenting style, which is the farm parenting style, and then there's the Minari parenting style. And I think it all comes together with all these other themes that we were talking about, control versus faith as well.
So I guess I'll ask, what do you think is the most central theme for this entire thing?
It's so hard to pin it down to one. So
that's the task. You got to do it. Because I think it's the first one. I think the other ones are sub things and they're important, but I think that's what most of this is. It's about him wanting to control things.
Yeah.
And by the end, him not letting go of the control of things.
Okay.
To some degree.
I think so too. Let's go with that. So I'm going to start with the family one since I brought that up and it has to do with Minari. So the idea, I think, is of course you have to, work. Of course you have to you're allowed to have your own dreams and all these things. But like the style in which he farmed, part of the problem with the farming is that it has to be controlled in so many ways. The conditions, the environment, the water, the heat even, right? Yeah. All of these things has to be so tightly controlled, and then it can still the randomness of life, right? Can destroy it. The fire, it represents that randomness in life, that chaos that destroys it. Whereas with the Minari, which represents the grandmother style towards life, towards parenting, was that you just need the right conditions in which life will thrive, right? So for the boy, her way of raising him up wasn't to control his walking and running speed, wasn't to control all these things. It was to simply love him. And in loving him, he grew and he learned how to thrive. Initially, it was hard, right? There was problems. He didn't like her. But after enough love, he was able to love her back and he was able to grow. And I think that's what Minari means. Like the Minari means that there's a lot of chaos to life. And it's not that you can't have plans. It's not that you can't devise things. Because I will continue planning for my family down the road and stuff. Yeah. But it's to understand that there's a randomness to life, and quite often, more often than not, just having the right condition, in this case, just loving the people around you, will provide the right environment for the people around you.
This is on the family bit, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to disagree that a loving family is nice and important.
Yeah.
So, yes. However, I still, and this is my sticking point, is a lot of this is framed, not necessarily by you, but also by the movie, as these like almost two sides of a coin, one or the other, etc. And I keep thinking, well, they aren't. These aren't actual dichotomies. These are things that can exist together. You can have a loving family where you love someone, but also tell them, please don't run. Your heart has a hole in it. Those are two things that can go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. You can have the right conditions for life and let things flourish, but also if you don't control your farm, you're not going to have very good produce, right? So I guess I don't disagree with you. I just think it's not as one or the other, black and white, as I feel the movie's message.
So one thing I thought, if you were to watch a Christian movie that, those grade A I'm a Christian, and yes, some of our movies are like Hallmark movies. Most of them are, but they provide the answer for you. Mm-hmm. The answer to the chaotic life is that it's not chaotic. It's all planned, right? But this movie, the reason why I think it has a very kind of universal relatableness to it, regardless of your faith, is because when you watch him like anointing the house, I don't get the sense that they're saying what this guy is doing is...
Yeah, it's not framed out. It's framed in like this is a waste of time and probably just nonsense superstition.
Yeah.
That's how it's framed. Anyway, that's the way I see it.
It kind of is. And even with religion, it doesn't say that there is a God. In fact, they kind of... It does some scrutinizing of Christianity, I would say, because you have two faiths in the movie. You have the zealous and almost insane faith of Paul.
Almost.
But then almost like one thing you see about him is that he's genuine, though, right?
Yeah.
He is genuine, and even though I thought he would be a problem when they first introduced him in the movie, because he's like, "Can I have a job?" Basically, I thought he was going to be a problem. He was never a problem. But what the other type of faith is actually not even a faith really at all. It's more of a cultural thing, right? So if you look at Monica, right, David says, "Hey, I notice you don't have..." Jacob says, I notice you don't have friends here. You know what we should do? Go to church. Why are they going to church?
To make friends.
To make friends, right? It's a cultural thing. So I don't think the movie frames that superstition is necessarily right, or, you know, having beliefs about things that are beyond your control is right. But what it is saying is that you simply, like, you can't control everything, and you have to be able to let go, right?
Yes, up until a point. So, up until he gets the guy with a dowsing rod to come to his farm, I'm on board with you. And then they have that scene, and that to me is not in line, because you can say, well, yes, he wants to have control of his farm, and he wants control of all this, but life happens, and sometimes you can't do anything about that. And that is fine. That makes sense. And the Minari, they flowered, and you need to be able to go with the flow. And, you know, yes, you have plans, but you need to be able to accept that things are not always the way you want them to be. And that's something he needs to learn. And that's something they all need to learn, honestly, because they're all struggling with this.
Yeah.
But I take personal umbrage with the dowsing rod at the end, because the fact that he just says, yeah, come point water at me, that is basically saying he's like, I'll just let things that I know to be wrong happen because I'm just going for that. That to me is taking it a step beyond what makes any reasonable sense for this character, I guess. And I worry about what the messaging of that is. What are we trying to say here? That, you know, if you're trying to do a thing, and like, are we saying we always listen to the experts? But when you have demonstrable proof and like research and science that says this is not how farming works, then, you know, why are we accepting this just because we're in this very Zen attitude all of a sudden? I guess I was struggling with that. I was like, what are we really trying to say here?
So I think I'll mention first that the first and foremost interesting thing about the ending is that they don't tell you whether that works, right?
Yes. I mean, we can't imagine that he does that and then he plugs it in and then it doesn't work. But, I mean, if that's the case, then why did you show us that?
Well, it's unanswered, right? And the reason why it's unanswered, I think, is that's part of the chaos of life, right? You can try it out. Maybe there is something to it out there. Maybe there is a God out there. Maybe there is some superstitious things out there, but you don't know for sure is what the movie is saying, right? And it's not saying that it was a good thing to do for him to douse. It's just saying that the good thing of him was being able to let go of control. Whether specifically dowsing is an actual thing, it's not saying whether that's true or not.
So like saying he doesn't know for sure that this doesn't work, so there's no harm in him trying, and the fact that he never tried is a problem. Is that sort of what you're getting at? That like is his frame of mind, his attitude towards it, the fact that he's closed-minded about it?
Yes, kind of. I think primarily I would say it's more about letting go of the control and understanding that there are things in life maybe you don't... Yeah, I guess I could go as far as saying the things in life you don't understand, and you should have maybe an open mind to it. But...
So I can get on board with him being open-minded and trying it out.
Yeah.
It did cost money, though, which was the prime. If they just said, we'll do this for free, I'm sure he would have been like, sure. But it does cost money, and they're tight on money, which I understand perfectly why he doesn't do the thing.
Yeah. I wouldn't have done the thing either.
Yes. I have trouble empathizing with any other person in this story because I'm fully on board with what the guy's doing. Except the fact that, you know, he did not communicate this, and obviously so put his family in a situation where they A, didn't want to be in, and B, were not expected or warned about being in, that part's not cool. But the rest of it, once they're all there, I'm like, this guy's he's just doing life, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's I like, as opposed to the Hallmark movies, right? They at the very end of the movie, they're still farming. The big thing is that they're farming together now.
So I don't know if I'm forgetting, like, what causes that? I mean, obviously there's the fire and stuff happens to she doesn't die, right? She's still alive.
Yeah.
The grandmother.
No.
She does die.
Grandmother. Oh yeah, she doesn't die.
Okay. What changes the wife's mind? Does it just fade off into montage after that?
No. So it's weird. So I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about the fire at one point. Mm-hmm. So for me, the fire itself is not necessarily a plot twist. I mean, it happens and I didn't expect it, but it's not really a plot twist in the sense because I already understand that they're talking about the chaos of life.
Yeah.
But what I thought was a plot twist was her action.
The grandmother?
Monica, the wife.
The wife?
Yeah, so Jacob goes in immediately to go grab his stuff, and I understand, of course, he's going to do that to try to save the veggies that he has, right? This is his livelihood. The wife, I didn't expect her to go in and help him. Like when I first, and I'm saying this having, like, I was watching every minute of the movie, I was paying attention. My prediction was that she was going to, if she goes in, she's going to tell him, like, this is insane, there's a fire, it's over. Yeah. Let go of it, right? Let go of this, which is because she wants him to let go of farming anyways, right? Or at the very least, she might just say, like, come on, like, drag him out, like, save him. But she goes right into there, risks her own darn life to help him with this, like, dream that's clearly crushed now, right?
Yes.
Like, I don't know if they got to salvage anything. And I thought...
Doubtable.
Yeah, so what that reveals to me was that, like, she always loved him. Like, she always did care about him. And when it came to it, like, she did not metaphorically walk through the fire with him. Like, she literally walked through the fire with him.
Okay.
Take that as you will. Maybe a little bit on the nose with the cliche there, but...
The movie's not being super subtle with its messages, yes.
No. But, like, she was 100% all the time with him. And for me, it still made sense because I did see... Like, she was opposed to it a lot, but I know that she was always supportive and did care about him.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, at least I found it very easy to dislike her. But that is not fair. Because, again, like I said, she has been thrown into a situation she doesn't want to be in.
Yeah.
And she wants to be somewhere else. She wants to be back in California.
I think so.
Wherever they're from. And that's where her friends are. That's where her life is. And that's where she thinks it's better to raise her kids, etc., etc. So obviously she doesn't like it, and every chance she gets to move, she wants to move. Where I think her fault lies is that she doesn't give it a shot. I don't think she ever genuinely gives it a shot. Whereas I think from the husband's point of view, where his fault lies is that he's too gung-ho about it. It's like this dream that he has,
yeah.
And he's unwilling to take into account that other people don't necessarily want this.
Yeah.
And he's just sort of diving into it head first. So that's his problem. And her problem is that I think she's unwilling to give it a shot. And even while they're farming, every time she's just like, can we just go back to chicken counting? Yeah.
To throw a wrench in there. I
love wrenches.
Yeah. I would suggest she kind of gave it a shot, maybe. Because she does go in there, and although the movie is explicit, basically, that she never does anything to help him with the farming until the very end, right?
Yes.
But she allows him to take water from their own house to fuel and feed the veggies, his farm, right?
Allow is a strong word, but yeah. She was aware he did it.
She was aware of it
didn't
say anything.
Yeah.
For my own family, I'd be pretty concerned about that and suddenly my taps don't work because there's no more water.
Yeah. When push comes to shove, when too thick and thin or whatever, when things are actually on fire, she's definitely with him. They obviously love each other and are in it together, I'd say. And it's like the quiet hardships, I guess. That's kind of interesting where they're having all this trouble when it's the small things. It's like the water.
Yeah.
Water's not really a small thing, but it's the water and the farming and like being uncomfortable and wanting your friends and all that stuff. And that's where they're having trouble. And that's when she wants to leave, when she's done with all this. And then when there's a fire, when it's like a literal disaster happening, that brings them together. And it's like, okay, let's just do this and let's. I think what's happening there is not necessarily that they're going to have a successful farm or whatever, but like they're going to give it a genuine shot, which is what I thought they should have been doing from the start. Just give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
I don't feel like it says anything necessarily about like you should let go of control and embrace the superstition and just embrace it and accept it. I don't think it's saying that working is wrong or that following your dreams is wrong. I think in all of this, it's just saying like, I don't know, it felt to me like it was saying in doing, you can't cease being. Like you can't forget like who you are simply as a person.
Okay.
Then I think that's something the grandmother kind of understood because all she was a grandmother and she never did the things of a typical grandmother, but she was always there for him just as a grandmother because she was his grandmother, right?
Yeah.
Jacob I'm sure he does want to take care of his family and there's a conflict there with the dreams, but I think the point in which his dream takes over taking care of his family or they're pitted against each other is when he forgets about his family and he starts doing all these things. He's always trying to fix things practically and he forgets that he's also in one way just a father. He also just needs to be a father to his son, right? And I think that's the thing that goes back to with Minari, right? The Minari, like there wasn't a lot necessarily that you have to do in just being these things and being a father and being a mother and being a son, a daughter, and all these things, you can actually produce a bountiful life, right? And at the point at which you forget those things and you start just doing and focus on that, that's where you've gone overboard to a Hallmark movie.
I can agree with that. Like in the pursuit of greatness or whatever, or pursuit of any dream, you can't forget to live.
You were going to use an arcane line.
Oh.
What was it?
In the pursuit of greatness, we forgot to do good or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, you can't just, and I'm sort of thinking it's like the American dream is sort of, this is not what the movie is trying to say, this is just how I feel, how I sort of spin that American dream is sort of poisonous.
Yeah.
Or it can be poisonous. And if you're focused on some externality and you have expectations set and you have all these things in your head and you just forget that life happens, man, and you can't control everything and you like drive towards your goals, absolutely, but like do not become so single-minded on that everything else falls away, because that is not how you live a happy life, and that is in fact will poison your life. And if he'd had his farm and his farm had been successful but his family was back in California, he would not have been happy. And I don't think the wife would have been very happy. She'd gone back and become the best chicken counter ever, but her husband wasn't there and she had to raise the kids alone, right? So maybe what the movie's saying is we can all find a middle ground. Maybe that's what I'm saying. We can all just find a middle ground. How about we just find a middle ground?
I think so. I don't think the movie's saying, right, what a Hallmark movie is saying. I don't think it's saying that just use your own two eyes and be practical in every situation, right? Rely on only yourself. It's saying that life is life, right? Pursue things, do things that you do in life, but just don't forget to just be there. Just be.
Get to live.
Right? And I think that, like, in society, this is something I always struggle with. I always gain value from purpose, right? So for me, there's always a goal that I need to be striving for to derive some sort of joy. And this movie suggests, I think, and a little bit like, joy will come and just pursue things, but like joy will just be there, right? Yeah. Be a person, be a human being, be a friend, be a wife, a husband.
You know what's interesting, or at least I find interesting, I'm actually looking at my notes now, is I realized when unless I'm remembering this wrong, when he shows up and the barn's on fire, he runs in to grab his things, right? Does he know where the grandmother is? Because I found that noteworthy. I was like, the first thing you thought about was your goods, not the other person that could have been in there dying. So yeah, I mean, that's just another highlight of like, yes, obviously he gets too focused on the craft on the farming to the exclusion of all else. But yeah, I just remembered that and I was like, oh yeah.
You've changed your original.
I mean, did I? Yes, I feel like he did get too focused on it. But I guess what I'm pushing back on is more like I can understand his frustration with like, can we just do this? And a lot of that is not happening, and I can see how that would drive a person to focus more and more on it. So I guess not necessarily that I fully agree with him, but that I understand where he's coming from a lot more than that I can really get where the other people are coming from, especially the two kids, because they're two kids. But yeah.
Actually, one thing I thought very relatable with David was, I don't know, finding your grandmother a little bit weird.
Oh, 100%. I'm on board with, like, I don't want this woman here. She's weird. I don't like her. She smells funny. Like, all those things are really mean and childish things to think. Yeah. And I remember thinking that about my grandmother. So
yeah. I was a little afraid to hug my grandmother, I think, when I was, like, David's age.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm so sad that I was ever scared of hugging my grandmother.
Yeah.
I wish I could hug her more, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Kids will be kids. And... yep, that's why you don't let kids make important decisions, everyone.
Nope. Sweet. I think we've landed on a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I don't know if that had any structure at all.
Problems, themes, arguing.
What is the main theme of this episode?
What is the main theme of this episode?
What's the title? What is this? Themes in Minari? Minari and the American Dream?
You know how...
Help us workshop the title, audience.
You know how dumb that is? I just thought the same thing. And I was like, wait, it's going to be released. I hope you guys, if you're looking for a movie out there that's a little bit different than, I guess, your blockbusters, it's something to go back to more of like a actual, like...
I mean, if they're looking for it, we just ruined the entire movie, so... maybe we should write non-spoiler versions of this.
If your ideologies and beliefs have been confirmed, drop a like. I don't know.
This episode was brought to you by the Farmers Association of Arkansas. Get your 1,000 watts today for only $9.99 plus tax.
Trust us, they know where to plant the well.